Saches Gittin Daf Yud begins with a Mishnah and contains another Mishnah towards the end of the Daf. The first Mishnah talks about the concept of a kusi, who is a witness. Now, what's a kusi? Kusi are a group of people that converted to Judaism when they were forced to by a plague of lions that were tormenting them. The Gemara here seems to be assuming that they are true converts, and therefore they count as Yisrael for all the halachas which require Yisrael. However, there is some question as to how much they know and whether they are trustworthy. So let's see the Mishnah. The Mishnah teaches the halacha of them being witnesses, and the Gemara tries to explain why this applies only to Gittin Nashim and Avadim and not to other types of shtaris documents. So let's begin the Mishnah. The Mishnah says we have a document with one kusi witness sign on it. So Gittin Nashim and Shechuri Avadim are kosher. Other documents are puzzle. The Mishnah says was an incident that happened before Gamliel in a city called Kfar Osnai, the town of Osnai. They brought a Gad Isha that had its witnesses, seems to imply both, were kusim, and he said that it is kosher. Different than what we said in the beginning of the Mishnah, that you can only have one aid. That's a kusi, and it is kosher. So now the Gemara wants to know who is the opinion that holds that kusim should be kosher for Gittin Nashim and not for other types of shtaris. The Gemara is going to say none of the opinions seem to differentiate between the two. They all seem to have a broad general understanding of what the halacha of kusi is. So where do we see a difference? The Gemara is going to go through a few options here. So the Gemara says is a three-way machlekes tanaim as to whether or not you're allowed to use kusi matzah. So matzah has to be made l'shem mitzvah. That means the shimur from chametz of the matzah has to be done lishma, and you have to make sure that it's not chametz, that they were careful that it's not chametz. So the first opinion is a Tanakama. He says that you can trust the kusi that he made it without it becoming chametz. You can also trust that it's lishma, and therefore you could eat it a whole Pesach and be yaitze with it Pesach night. And Belazar says no, you cannot use it any day of Pesach at all. You have to be afraid the kusim are not trustworthy. You have to be afraid that it's chametz. The third opinion is of Shimon ben Gamliel. He says kusim keep some mitzvahs and not others. The ones that they keep, they do better than Yisrael do. So if this is a mitzvah that they keep, then you can rely on it even better than you could Yisrael, and therefore you can certainly rely on it. Now, Rashi explains that he's adding to the Tanakama that even if it's a halacha d'Rabbanan, as long as they keep it fully. So Gemara says, which opinion are we going with over here when we're applying to trusting a witness on a shtar? If you're the Tanakama, you should be able to trust them. He holds that kusim are trustworthy, so we should be able to trust them. It shouldn't be a difference between a get or a different kind of document. If you're Rabbi Lazar, they're not trustworthy. Again, shouldn't be a difference between a get and any other document. And if you're Shimon ben Gamliel, says depends if they hold of it or not. So then it just depends if they hold of it or not. If they're trustworthy witnesses, they hold of not lying, then you can trust them on every document. If they don't hold of the mitzvah to not lie, then you shouldn't trust them on anything. Now the Gemara offers the obvious solution. Maybe they only hold of it in Gittin Nashim and Avadim, but when it comes to other shtaris, they don't mind lying. So the Gemara says that can't be correct, because why would there be a difference between two witnesses and one witness? Why would there be just one witness? If a kusi is just as good as anyone else, just as good as a regular Yisrael in the things that he hold of, and for the Gittin Nashim, they hold of that, so then even both witnesses should be okay. So the Gemara therefore says in Upshat, the Gemara says really they're not trustworthy. Kusi is generally not reliable. Could be that there are reliable kusim out there, but generally we have to assume that they're not reliable, and that is Rabbi Elazar's opinion. The situation here is where the other aide was a regular Yisrael, and he signed underneath the signature of the kusi, and therefore we say as follows: the Yisrael would not have signed had he not recognized that the kusi is trustworthy, and therefore you can trust not only the Yisrael but also the kusi. If, however, both signatures would be kusim, we have no reason to believe that, because we don't trust kusim generally, only in this situation where you have the signature below it. So the Gemara says, if that's true, again, the same thing should apply by other shtaris. Why is there a difference between Gittin Nashim and other shtaris? If you have the Yisrael signed under the kusi, he's testifying that it's okay and it should be trustworthy. What must be the reason that you don't trust this situation by other shtaris? Because the fact that the Yisrael signed second doesn't prove anything. Could be that he left a space for someone to sign above him. He signed first. He figured it was going to be someone older and more chashuv than him to sign before him. He left the space, and he never knew that the person who signed ended up being a kusi. If that's true, again, there's no difference between Gittin Nashim and other types of shtaris. So I therefore answers that the rule, we learn from here that there's a rule that a get Isha or Avadim, there's a Tekanas Chazal that all the witnesses have to know who each other are. You can't sign it unless you know who the other witnesses are. Therefore, if you have a second witness who's a Yisrael, he must know that the other witness was a Kusi, and he must have signed only because he knows that he's trustworthy. Now, other shars you don't have that halacha. What's the reason? So the Gemara says because we have a particular concern. It could be that somebody will say to a group of, let's say, 10 people, all of you give a get to my wife. Situation like that, the get's only kosher if all 10 of them sign on it, or at least one writes and the other 9 sign. We're afraid that the witnesses won't be responsible to make sure that all 10 are there, and therefore it'll look like a kosher get because there'll be a regular get written and signed by 2 people, but really it's not kosher because the husband had said all of you have to be on it. Therefore, we want to make sure that everybody knows that everybody's going to be there. So because of that concern, we made a general rule. In all situations of a get, shechor, or nashim, you have to have all people signed knowing about each other. Other stars, you don't have to like that, so therefore there's no issue. Okay, the Gemara now moves on to another sub-topic. The Gemara says that there's a statement of Rabbi Elazar who says only one aid kusi is kosher. If you have 2, it's not. The Gemara says, it says that straight out in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says a get that has one aid kusi signed on it by other gitim is possible, and by gitin nashim and avadim it's kosher. So you see clearly it's only kosher if it's one. The says no. Maybe I'll tell you that in that case, the only reason why we mentioned one is to show that even if it's only one aid kusi, it's possible by other shtaros. But in the case of gitin nashim and avadim, it would be kosher even if both aidim were kosher. Were kusim. The reason why we didn't talk in this case about both Eidim being kusim is to say that even in that situation, by the other stars is possible. The Gemara now asks, well, this contradicts the story. You want to tell me that one aid is kosher, but 2 Eidim are puzzle? The Mishnah brought Rabbi Gamliel with Kfar Osnai, and it said that its witnesses, plural, were kusim, and he was machshir. So the Gemara gives 2 answers to this. Abaye says change the text. Instead of saying witnesses, it should say it's witness, singular. Rava says, really, there were 2 witnesses, and Rabbi Gamliel is actually arguing on the Tanakama. And this is how you have to read the Mishnah. The Tanakama says 1 aid is kosher, Rabbi Gamliel says 2 aidim kosher, and there was a story with Rabbi Gamliel and Kfar brought a get with 2 witnesses that were kusim, and he was machsheret. Now we get to the next Mishnah, which discusses Gittin Daf that were made in secular courts, non-Jewish courts. So we have a machlekes. The Tanakama says all those that in a secular court, all other types of shtaris are kosher except for Gittin Daf Shechuri Avadim. Rav Shimon says no, they're kosher in secular courts as well. The only thing that's possible is if it's made in a secular layman environment. It's not made by non-Jewish judges, it's made by non-Jewish laymen. That is possible. By non-Jewish judges who make a get Isha or a get Eved is kosher. The Gemara now begins. The Gemara wants to discuss other shtaris first. The Gemara says, you're telling me other shtaris made in a non-Jewish court works. The Gemara's question is, why should that be? The Gemara wants to differentiate between 2 types of shtaris, a bill of sale and a shtar of a gift, where you transfer title of a piece of property, we're talking about real estate here, by means of a gift document. The Gemara says if it's a bill of sale, I understand why it works. And that's because there's a bill of sale, there's also an exchange of money. So the transfer of title takes effect in the exchange of money. What's the point of the document? The document's a proof. And it's important that it should be signed by the judges in a non-Jewish court, because that way we'll have proof that the money was transferred. They would not have agreed to write the document if they didn't see a transfer of the funds. So there is no actual validity to the shtar. It just teaches us it's proof that there must have been a transfer of funds, and the transfer of funds is what transfers the title and makes the sale valid. Now, however, if you talk about a gift, there's no transfer of money. So what makes the sale valid? What makes the transfer of title from the giver to the receiver of the gift valid? There's no exchange of money, and a shtar written in a non-Jewish court has no validity and doesn't prove anything. So how is this supposed to work? So the Gemara answers 2 answers. Shmuel says, Dina de Malchusa Dina. If there's transfer of title in secular court, then the halacha follows. Title transfer causes the the halachic transfer of title is caused by the secular court ordaining that the transfer has been effected. The second shot the Gemara says is that when we said except for Gittin Nashim, we mean except for things like Gittin Nashim as well. And a gift is considered to be like Gittin Nashim as well, that is caused by the document, not the document's proof, that it's a document that effectuates the transfer. And therefore, Gittin Nashim and anything like it, anything where the shtar needs to effectuate the transfer, does not work. Gemara now turns to the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon said, even a shtar that's written in the non-Jewish court works. Even a get nashim and avadim that's written in a non-Jewish court works. Somebody asked right away, how's that possible? The only people who can make a shtar and a shlichus and everything involved in a divorce are people who are in the parsha. And Akum is not in the parsha at all. He doesn't have all these halachas. So how could they make the shtar? How could they do this at all? So Gemara answers, this is Gemara we saw quoted yesterday. Rabbi Shimon is holding like Rabbi Lazar, who holds that Edim Sirah are required. We don't need witnesses on the shtar at all. You just need a written piece of paper, and the divorce happens when Edim see the document handed from the husband to the wife. Doesn't matter why the signatures are there. You could ignore the signatures. They're not necessary. So Gemara asks, but Rabbi Lazar agrees that if the signatures are if they're a problem, then they do ruin it. He only says you don't have to have signatures, but if you have bad signatures, that's a problem. So how could this work? These signatures are not kosher signatures. The people who sign are not Jews, and they're not therefore negated to the whole parsha of krisus. So Gemara answers, no. The only reason that apostle signatures are a problem is because if the signatures are there, we may end up relying on them to become the Edim Masira. Here we're talking about where they're clearly non-Jewish names, and therefore we'll know not to rely on them.